Good morning. I've got two hands here. Um, I've already started on them. Messed up recording, so I just started it since I was fairly early in the hand. Both of these hands I'm going up to bet. See if that call was good or maybe if I should have raised or possibly folded. So in this hand we have limp and then a min. So I think with this limper range, it's 32-13. I have 114 hands on. We look at his stats, it doesn't really look like he plays position too much, but it seems like he's definitely more willing to raise from early and middle position than he is in later position. Now, got more hands here that might have allowed him to raise than button small blind. So let's say button only had opportunity, didn't have a hand, not going to raise. So I think when looking at this, we're going to be somewhat of a tight range. He probably would have raised his better hands, so his Broadway suited Broadway, but instead he chose to. So it was at Ace 9, Ace 2 suited, King 10, Queen 10, Jack 10, suited Broadways, suited connectors. These pocket pairs, I think he probably has a lot of pocket pairs. He's 10, Jack, Queen, so forth. This next guy, you can see that he's basically played almost every hand so far, 14, 15. His pre-flop raise is only percent. And I think what we can do when we look at this raise stat, we have to account for the size. So didn't raise like a standard amount. Didn't raise the 4, or 4.5. He did a min, and I think that really um, helps narrow our range down a little. So if he bet larger, I would expect him to have these big Broadway cards. So Jacks plus, Ace Jack, Queen, because he's raising to build a pot when he has these good hands. Could have limped behind, and I think limps behind, he's going to be limping with offsuit aces, these suited two gappers, probably the suited kings, probably the offsuit connectors, maybe king 9, king 9, jack, so forth. But he didn't limp, he min raise. So with the min raise, I think he's going to have these pocket pairs, so tens to deuces, uh, probably suited connectors, the speculative hand, say. And really, the only big cards that he's going to are the king, jack, king. So against ranges, pocket tens is actually right at the top. So our decision is to fold, which I don't think his hand is too strong to fold, and then call and raise. So I think both of them have positive EV decision. But let's talk about which one might be preferred. So I just called, and I think this might have been a mistake because by calling, we're going to encourage these other three players to call, which puts us in a multi-way pot with a decent hand. I think if we had pocket fives, pocket sixes, that might be a little bit different because if we hit, if we don't hit a pair, I'm sorry, if we don't have it's unlikely for us to have the overpair in this case. Whereas with tens, it's possible, probably likely that we'll flop an overpair to the board, and that allows us then bet and possibly pick up the pot, buy people, basically buy equity, hold. So calling with tens, I think just while it's plus EV, it's going to encourage people who call. It's going to cut into equity hand. Now, which player is most likely to call this one? This button. He is called two bets 70% of the time. He's loose. I have him listed as very loose. He can shove on draw and shovel with nuts. He calls down with second pair on a flush or on a flush board that got there and on a paired board. He's very loose. And I think that's a guy that if we raise, if he and he calls, we like that because he's calling with a lot of weaker hands, and we've built up a pot figure to be best. Whereas if we just call, he's going to call, and then possibly this guy calls 30% of the time. He's loose passive. And this guy might look at it and say, okay, well, it's one more big bet, one more big blind. I'll call and see if I hit something big. So I don't like the call here. I should have raised. And sure enough, age off comes along. Villain 6 calls. Villain 8 get to see the flop. So what I'm going to have to do is look at Villain 1's hand. Build his call. So that's over tab. We have this guy's range. He is MP3. I'm the cutoff with 10 of clubs, 10 hearts. And it's MP2 with this range. Let's sit in. What we'll do is we'll use this guy's range for cutoff, or we'll alter it. So he calls. He could have raised 3-bet. 3-bet by position. See, he really doesn't 3-bet much. He does raise first in, but then everything else is limping. Pre-flop raise, limping. So raising limpers. His 3-bets has come on the button 7 times, and then small blind. These are probably steals. So when he raises, he's probably raising something fairly tight, choosing to limp with. See what bet range. I have aces, queens, ace, king suited, jack suited. I'm gonna guess that we're in the blind, and maybe we're wrong. Maybe his button range is that jack 10. That's his range. And after that, we're looking wide. It's most suited. It's hold 2 bets from blind. See offsuits, jack 9 to jack 6 offsuits. He called 2 bets in position. So I have a lot of these offsuit. All of them probably suited. That's a huge range, 6.7%. But I think that's something that he's likely playing. So let's run these, see what we get. I'm ahead of both of these 2 guys, and I figure to be ahead of this guy's range. Of the pocket pairs, does, and then has all of these unpaired hands. So I do think we are looking pretty good. So when you look at it, yeah, with 4-way pot, we're not going to be favored, but we will have the highest equity out of 3. So we're going to stop that. So we see a flop of clubs, 8 of hearts, 3 of hearts. So now 8 of hearts, 3 hearts. All right. And we will have, see that guy, that limp guy, he checks. No big surprise. He's going to check basically everything. Then you have a very weak min bet. Yeah, big blind. What is he going to do? So he already showed his weakness with that very weak play. This is a feeble attempt just to see if he did anything. He's probably high. I think a flush draw probably bets higher. I think sets are betting higher, 2 betting higher, pair, top pair. I think any pair is basically bet higher except these weak pairs. We can look at gut shots, maybe. Open-ended straight draw. I think he probably bets bigger or checks it. or checks it. And same thing with the flush draw. I think he's going to bet bigger or he checks it. Gut shot, though, it's a long shot. Probably still just bets one. If he catches it, then we'll probably see him to 230. Sure. So that's his range, and pretty good. See 10 of hearts. See against that. So I think we're in a spot where we probably should raise. We can't call and have these other two calls their entire range. What we need to do is raise it and try to get the overcard to full paired over. So I raised to 12, which appropriate. Should have raised. And then this guy calls. So what does he call? Again, he's very loose. He shoved with the draw, shoved with it. It's called down with second pair on a flush and a pair. That's a big, I think. So I think the question is, what is he gonna raise? And I think he might, this guy shoved with draw and with pulled down with second pair. Let's look at his flop, see what he has not. Too bad. It's 8%. So we're looking at. So doesn't he probably he'll raise with some frequency. Raise with some frequency. I'm trying to decide whether to include the flush draws or I think they do call, but I wouldn't be surprised if he shoves over top. Being as passive as he is, if he checks and then I lead out 6, I think that's when he could raise. So I think we'll flush draw, open-ended straight draws in there. I think the gut shot's in there. I think any pair is in his range. So pair plus. Not sure about 2 cards, but I think we've got a range. 10 of clubs, 10 of hearts. So I'm still ahead of that range. And what we see is that first guy folds, but this guy calls. Let's get his range. It's his range. That guy's done. He called. So and that's that one calls. I think the no made hand is out. But I do think ace high is still going to call. He's going to hope to catch his ace. His weak pair is probably going to call. Hope to catch trips or 2 pair. I think we're with something like this. Let's get these. So you can see I am against these 2 opponents. I'm 60% with their calling range. Now the queen gets there. I don't think that's a great card because 10 jack gets there. I think queen jack would have called. 10 would have called. So right now, all of those queens beat us. So villain 8 checks. Checks, I don't think it's the gut shot. He would have bet because the heart draw is out there. So it's like take out a straight. It's top pair hand. I would have bet again. So he checks. Still think he's pair ace high. Maybe not flush draw. Still. But I think flush draw still bets. Actually, no, because I he's gonna check. So still 75% of the. So what should we do? Should we bet? I did. I bet 2/3. So I bet I'm still being aggressive because I think hands that are gonna call. I think this guy, I'm not too worried. Made a it's kind of called along. Say I've got. What I'm trying to do now is build the pot, make it incorrect for them to call with a heart draw. And if they call, which more do, I'm building a pot when I have the best hand. Against villain one, I know I'm certain he's going to call with his pairs. I already raised. For some reason, he's not going to believe. He's not going to believe me. So he's going to still call with any pair. He's still going to call with a flush draw. He's going to call with the straight draw. That shot though, not so sure. So his fold to C bet is 52%, fold to turn C bet is 40%, fold to river C bet is 25%. And when you get to his one at showdown, it's going to be about 50%. But when he gets to showdown, still he's basically winning times when people continue to bluff, or he catches them with top pair. So that's all of the hands that he's calling. I'm still ahead. Now, is there ever a chance that he's going to raise? Yeah, I think he's going to raise big on the straight. I think a set would probably raise. I think two pairs still just going to call. Over pairs probably just going to call. Top pairs just going to call. All these pocket pairs. Flush draws maybe raise. I don't. Kind of depends on how he sees me. So he calls. Still at 73%, and this other guy folds, so he's done. Because when I bet, I think he's giving up all of his weak pairs and his ace high hands at that. So now we go to the river. Got a 6 of diamonds, and again, now when we think about it, this run out just really wasn't that good for me, and really I kind of question whether I should have bet. Now I did bet because I think there's a lot of cards that he called that I beat. So all of those nines, like 9, 10, 9 jacks going, 10, 8, 10 jacks, 9, 7, 8, 7. Those hands are all going to call. All hands that I beat, and probably also the ace, all of the ace threes and king. I think he's going to call with all of those. So I bet to get value, and now we're on the river. Question is, what are we? So against his range, I'm still at 68%. If I bet, I do think he's going to call his pairs, his middle pair plus his weak pair. That's questionable. So look at his river call, his river C bets in position. He's one his turn. C bets in position. That's it. He's giving up if he didn't catch something. He has a pair, so he's still going to call. What about his raises? So his raise C bet, he really hasn't raised at all. If I bet, I'm not expecting to get raised. So if he's only going to call with middle pair plus, we're at 37%. If he calls with all of his, we're at 68%. So the question is, should we bet and basically set our price, or should we check and call? Here's the catch. When I bet 30 big blinds, it only left me with. So I think if I check, I have to be willing to call. And I think this is what I should have check called this hand, because if I check, then I think he get the weak pairs in his range. Probably also the ace highs and maybe even 8 hands. I think he's going to go ahead and try to take a stab and assume that I missed the heart draw, and maybe his missed heart draw what's going to bet at that. So I think here I should have checked and then called his river bet, which I expect. What is his river float? River float, he's never been in that situation. His turn float was 0 to pop float 21%. So missing the C bet, he's likely to. So he calls me. At this point, I'm behind a lot of hands, and what you see is he has 6 of hearts. Is that in his range? Yeah, believe it or not, I do have that in his range, is 2 pair. So he played all of those suited queens. Maybe even he'll play suited jacks, but I think this is kind of an unfortunate hand. The queen, he was calling with the flush draw. He managed to catch a top pair, so he's calling with top pair and flush draw. And then he catches his 2 pair, and at that point, it's never. Is there a way that we can get away with it against this opponent? Probably not, is what I would say, because I do think he's calling all of his 9s and 8s, and you can go for Streets of Value. All right, so this is hand number 1. Let's clear it out. So he's probably not calling, not folding, because he's going to call with all of his pairs, his 9s, his 8s, and everything. All right, so this is hand number 1. Let's close it out and start hand number 2. Hand number 2 is Ace 4 of Hearts. We have Villain 1 open raises 3 big blinds, and we are faced with a decision of whether to call or to 3-bet here. So early position player limp, open raises. I've got 63 hands on him. When we look at mid position, his raise first in's 13%. He plays about 18% of hands, so I think he's going to be playing okay range. So just kind of give us a default. Maybe the suited aces, maybe we'll take those out. We don't know if he's going to play those or not. That's, 13%. That's probably okay. We have Ace 4 of Hearts. When we look at Ace 4 of Hearts, you can see that it's going to be more towards the bottom of his range. Looking at this, while we can call and hope to hit, an ace or a flush draw, I think we probably set ourselves up to be in a bad spot. If we call, I think these 2 players might also call. Not sure about the button. He might call because he's going to have ultimate position, but I think this could be a decent spot with the Ace 4 based on his tight range that we can raise and then get him to fold a decent chunk of this range. So if we raise here, I think he's probably going to fold some of these small pocket pairs, and with considering how tight he is, he might fold all the way up to pocket 4s, pocket 5s, probably fold suited connectors, maybe fold king jack, maybe the ace jack off, king queen off. So I do think raising could be good. It's good to be aggressive, and we've got flush draw, we've got our ace, and we have our wheel draw. I didn't do that. I called. So, against that range, you can see we're at 40%. Not my favorite call. And then button calls and big blind calls. So, what about these hands? Let's see here. So, we've got a calling range. Let's clear that. He plays 30% of hands from the button. 31% with pre-flop races. His 3-bet, he hasn't 3-bet, so what I think we're going to do is basically give him, we're going to take out queens plus ace king. I think he'd probably raise those. Probably do something like that. Maybe all the broadways. We'll do all the suited aces he calls. We're at 19%. We'll do the suited 2 as well as the suited 2 gappers. And the big blind's probably going to be about that same amount. He might have all his offsuit aces as well. Could be. So we'll see what happens in this hand. And like the other person, ace 4 is not really going to be at the top of their range. So we're playing this as a speculative hand, hoping to hit. We hit, flush draw now. So king of hearts, 5 spades, and 3 of hearts. So we've got our flush draw, which is probably going to be good. And we also have our gut shot. So, what happens is this guy bets, and you know, I think this is a good board for him to bet. So I do think he's going to probably c-bet with his entire range. He might play it to say, well, I've got 3 other players behind me that could have hit this flop as well. But, you know, when you think about calling hands, most likely calling hands are going to be those middle cards. So, you know, if it came Jack 10, 9, 8, I think he's going to be a little bit tighter on his c-bet range. Obviously, his c-bet flop is 100%. It's 2 out of 2. We don't have a large stat on this guy. So what I think I'm going to do is include, you know, basically his entire range here, 89.1%, or I'm sorry, 100%. And against that range, we're at 58%. I do think this is a good spot for us to go ahead and raise at this time. If he doesn't have a king, he's just going to fold. If these guys don't have kings, they're just going to fold. If he does have a king, we have the heart draw and we have the gut shot, you know, wheel draw to go along with this. So we have equity. The ace is probably, let's say 50% of the time if the ace comes, we're going to be good because we're dealing with ace king. I do think he's got king queen and king jack in his hand that is going to call. So I do think we should raise. I think we should be aggressive at this point. In my poker career, I think we should be raising here. I didn't. I just called. And you can think, well, what else would have called here? I honestly don't know what else would call. Yes, the king hits the raise, but if we call, what does that really tell us? What does that tell our opponent? It tells him the most likely hand that we have is going to be a heart or possibly a king. So if we just call and he doesn't have a king, he's not going to bet again. He's just going to check and he's going to fold to any bet, which, I mean, is good for us. But if we raise it with a king, he might think, oh, we have that flush draw, because a lot of people also do, you know, raise flush draws, and they're going to call, you know, that raise and give us another, you know, another bet basically, whereas they would have just folded to that bet on the turn. So I think we definitely should have raised. We definitely should have raised. So this guy's out, the other guy's out. We're heads up. 10 of clubs hits. I think that's actually a pretty decent card for us. Because now if you think about any card, any hand that calls could be a 10. Actually, I think the 10's probably neutral, and in terms of hitting ranges, it's probably going to hit his range a little bit harder, because I don't see myself calling with the 10-9 or a jack 10, calling a c-bet with those hands. So that's either neutral or it's slightly favoring his range. He checks, so we can kind of think about what is he checking with. I don't know if he's going to check with top pair anymore. I would have expected him to bet, unless he is, I mean, he's a tight and kind of a passive player. So I think ace king might check here. I'm sorry, ace king would bet, but then king queen and king jack might actually check because he's afraid of, you know, monsters under the bed. Pocket pair below top pair, queens and jacks, I do think he's probably going to check those. Again, he bet, I called, and now he's afraid of the king. The weak pair, same thing. I think he's going to check here. Ace highs are checking. No made hands are checking. Flush draw, it's going to be a small number. I'm not, and he's betting 100% of his range. I don't think he's betting on these draws anymore. So I think that's his checking range. We're still on a draw. So what we can do is think about, if we bet here, what is he going to fold? If we bet, so this is 81% of hands, 81.8, we'll get that down. If I bet here, I think he is going to fold, though, everything but top pair, pocket pair, middle pair, because he might not believe that I actually have a hand. That's 26.5%. So if I bet at 81.8, he's only continuing with 32%. He's folding 70% of the time. And really, a player like this might actually only call with top pair, maybe the pocket pair below top pair. So like even less frequently. So I think this is a good spot to go ahead and bet this tight passive player. We could probably bet half pot here and be good. Half pot only needs to work like 33%. I think we're gonna get that. No problem. I bet a little bit larger. So is that like 2/3 pot? And he calls. So I think at that point we're at, yeah, maybe not middle pair. So I think jacks, queens, and then the kings, minus the ace king. So he calls. We're still, I think when he calls, we know we need to hit. We need to catch our heart, and we did. So heart or straight. So he checks. That's no big surprise. So I do think with how passive he is, he's going to check his entire range here. And then the question is, can I get value for worse when I have, the nuts? And I do think so. So on this, I do think he's going to call. He's tight passive. With how I played, it kind of represents that I have the ace. And when we look at his range, he's got king queen. I do think he's going to call those. And now king jack improved to 2 pair. Pocket jacks improves to a set. I think the pairs that's going to fold is probably the queens. And that's about it. So I think I'm getting called 75% of the time, maybe 100% of the time if he calls with the queens. And we're going to win this hand. So I do think we bet. I don't think we mess around with betting small. I think he's just going to call with everything because he's got a solid hand on this board. He does. So I shoved all in. He calls, and he shows king queen. So yeah, he had that top pair. Just kind of made sense. I think ace king would have continued betting. He just got scared because he probably would have played ace king offsuit passively. If he was in my position, so he naturally assumed that when I called the flop, oh, I must have ace king, so now he's gonna slow down, probably. All right, so that's hand number 2. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Look tomorrow for a few more hands.